What is a disciple? I think there's many different ways that you could define what a disciple is. So to simplify things, to give us a simple definition to work with, I'm going to define a disciple as a person that follows Jesus. I don't disagree with this definition, as a disciple is someone that follows Jesus. While I do not disagree with the definition, sometimes I think we can have a misunderstanding of what it means to be a disciple of the Lord. One misunderstanding I think we have of what it means to be a disciple is some may see it as a problem-free life. That once we make this commitment to being a disciple, that we will never have a problem again in our lives. How often do we hear about a testimony to faith, to discipleship, where the witness talks about how prior to having faith or becoming a disciple, they had all kinds of problems and challenges in their lives. And now that they made this commitment to faith, to discipleship, we may get the impression that all their problems and challenges are gone. While we may get this impression, I'd argue that the problems and challenges are still there. But what I think the Lord does through our commitment, it gives us a sign of hope. It gives us strength to work through our problems and challenges that we do face in our lives. It is with the Lord in our lives that the impossible becomes possible. Paul calls on Timothy to bear your share of hardship for the gospel with strength that comes from God. We see signs of hope surface in our scriptures today in the face of difficult situations. We hear of God's promise to Abram to make him a great nation. It's with Abram's faith in that promise that he leaves land and house of his father. We hear of the promise today. But what we so easily can forget is that Sarah, Abram's wife, was barren. They were childless and had no heir. No one to carry on the family legacy. Yet, it is Abram's faith and trust in God, his promise, that he does what the Lord instructs him to do. And eventually, God does come through on his promise and does make Abram a great nation with descendants beyond counting. In the same way, today we hear of Peter, James, and John experiencing the transfiguration, being led up that high mountain where Jesus' face shone like the sun. Moses and Elijah appeared. The casting cloud and the voice coming from the cloud. A moment where the disciples were probably scared and experienced the Lord's glory all at the same time. But again, what I think we so can easily forget is just prior to the disciples and Jesus going up on the mountain, Jesus told the disciples that he was going to suffer greatly. For the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, he'd be killed and raised on the third day. The transfiguration, this experience of the Lord's glory, did not stop any of this from happening. It's in the midst of this challenge that God reveals his glory. Not so much to change the reality. I mean, Sarah and Abram were still childless. And Jesus still goes to the cross. But I think the revelation of this glory comes as a way of assuring them that God would be with them. We read about this in our scriptures. But I think we also experience it in our own lives. We experience challenges. God reveals God's self to us in ways to assure us that he's going to be there to take care of us. I'm reminded of a story of a lady who was diagnosed with cancer. And she went through the treatments for a time, and they were really not working for her. And she was getting tired. So in her prayer of faith to Jesus, she decided to stop treatment and trusted that Jesus would take care of her. And Jesus did take care of her. No miraculous healing happened. Yes, the cancer eventually took over her body. Her body physically died. She may have physically died, but she believed in the hope of the resurrection. At her visitation, after you greeted the family, she had a note for each of the people that came to the visitation, within that note saying, "I am free at home. Thank you for coming." In my own personal life, as being called to the priesthood, God started to call me in the middle of my sophomore year, junior year of high school. As I was a senior getting ready to graduate, I began to respond to that call. But saying yes to that call was also a yes of uncertainty on how it would all work out. One, for school and I were not the best of friends. Yet it's also during this time I just went on this retreat, Life in a Spirit retreat, and it was a moment of scary, experiencing God's glory. But at the same time, it was a moment of wonder and awe. God gave me a message of assurance that He'd be there with me. But it did not change the fact that it was always easy. Yes, I'm still a priest, but there were challenges. There was that day I threw a book across the room. Yet it's when we experience the Lord's glory that God's going to be there with us, that we know anything is possible for us as we journey. We are committed disciples of the Lord. While it may be conceived that this is a problem-free life, reality tells us a different story. Being a disciple of the Lord in life means there's going to be challenges and struggles. And it's in the midst that God reveals God's glory to us. not necessarily to change our reality, but to give us hope. To give us hope that He'll be there to help us to grow in our own faith. As we journey with the Lord through the season of Lent, we journey carrying our own crosses. We do so with the hope that we too will one day experience the glory of the Lord's resurrection as well.